Hello there, and welcome back to the Teresa Santos Show and La Rosa Coaching. Today, I wanted to talk a little bit more about the EBBA form, which is the Exclusive Buyer Agreement form. But before we move forward, make sure that you like this video when we're done, that you subscribe to it somewhere over here. There's a subscribe button. Make sure you subscribe to it and make sure that you share with your colleagues because there's a lot of agents who are not paying attention to this. And obviously, we need to make sure that they are in the loop. So today, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the form and we're going to discuss it one more time because there were a couple more changes since the last time I recorded this video. So I want to make sure that everyone does understand how to fill out this form and when to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And let's bring that document up. And here we go. Now, the form that you will now be using, make sure that your broker has the updated forms because sometimes those forms are not updated. So make sure that the form is the EBBA. So if you can see it here, the EBBA 7TB revised July of 24. There's, I think, one that was done in June. Since then, they actually did another one or revised a couple things. So now this is the one that we're currently using, which is the revised 724 EBBA 7TB. So make sure that you're using the correct form when you're giving these to your clients and or consumers. All right, so let's go through this form again because I want to make sure that everyone understands how to fill it out. And then obviously I will answer some key questions that you're probably wondering about. So right now, again, parties. Who's the parties? It used to say buyer. Now it says consumer. Okay, so if you have one that says buyer, that's probably the wrong form. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put here consumer. Here is going to be all the buyers that you're working with. So that means if it's mom and dad and brother and sister and uncle and whoever the buyers, whoever is going to be on the as is contract when you make the offer for the house. Those are the parties that you're going to have to put here as the consumer. The other one you're going to put here is the broker. Who is your broker? If you're with La Rosa, it would be La Rosa Realty. If you're with another broker, it would be whatever your broker name is. It is not your team name. It is not your name. It is specifically the broker. Right here it says broker. Okay. Now let's go ahead and read this. Grants the broker the exclusive right to work with and assist consumer in locating and negotiating the acquisition of suitable real property as described below. The term acquire or acquisition includes any purchase, any option to purchase, any exchange, any lease, or other acquisition of an ownership or equity interest in the real property. What does that mean? That this will cover a purchase, right? If you're helping your buyer buy, if you're helping your buyer with an option to lease or an option to buy, if you're helping them with an exchange of some sort, and also if you're helping them with a lease. So it covers you on all ends, okay? Term, this agreement will begin. This has to be dated before you go show homes. Before you open the door to any home, to tour anyone, to go see a house, this has to be signed. This will be checked by your broker. So if you went out on a Saturday to go show homes and you got this signed on the Monday after, you're already in violation. Okay. So you have to make sure that this is signed before you go show properties or the day of. If you're going to go show someone the property on Saturday and they haven't signed this agreement, you have to take this agreement with you on Saturday so that they can sign it, or you have to stop showing them property. Okay. Now there's two other forms that you can use. We're not discussing those two other forms. One is a showing agreement, and the other one is just sort of like I'm going to show you one property type of agreement. Okay. So just make sure we're talking about this particular one, which is when you're already married to the client, when you're married to the consumer. Okay. So, and we'll terminate at 11:59 p.m. on the end of the termination of this agreement. Now, I recommend minimum 6 months. Totally up to you. We all know some buyers take 2 weeks to buy a house and some buyers take 6 months to 9 months to buy a house. So you have to make sure that you are covered within this termination or this period. Okay. So at least 6 months, unless your buyer doesn't agree, to do 6 months and they only want 3 months. Remember, everything here in this contract is negotiable. Okay. Property. Consumer is interested in acquiring real property as follows or otherwise acceptable to the consumer. Type of property. Now, you can go in here and put single family because this is only pertaining to residential, does not pertain to commercial properties. That means if the unit is more than 4, remember, residential is only from 1 to 4 units. If it's more than 4 units, obviously it's a commercial transaction. If it's under 4 units, it's a residential transaction. So type of property, you could put in here condo, townhouse, single family, and all of that craziness, or you can put residential property. So whichever you prefer. If you put residential property, it pretty much covers condos, townhouses, single families, and anything that's multi-unit up to 4 units. Now, location. Again, you ask your client, are you looking in Homestead? Are you looking in Doral? Where are you looking, right? To cover, because you're not going to put in their Homestead, Miami Lakes, Doral, because, clients also change their mind. Sometimes they start with, I want to live in Doral, and because they can't afford Doral, now they're living in Homestead, or they want to now look at Homestead. So in order for you to get covered, just put the county that you're looking in. In our case, we're very close to Broward County too, right? Or if you're in Central Florida, it might be Osceola County and Orange County. So I would put the counties that are closest to you that you might take that buyer to go buy a house, okay? So in my case here in South Florida, I would put Miami-Dade and Broward County. So that way just, you cover yourself instead of just putting in here, Miami, and then all of a sudden they want to go buy in Fort Lauderdale, okay? Broker's obligations. Broker's obligations are the same as broker's obligation to a listing. So it's broker assistance. Broker will use, professional knowledge and skill, discuss property requirements and all that great stuff. So you can read that on your own. I don't need to read to you what your obligations are. You should know what those are. But this is just basically discussing what the broker's obligations, or you as an agent obligation, is to the consumer. It talks a little bit about fair housing. It talks about service providers. Okay, brokers do not warrant or guarantee products or services provided by any third party whom the broker at consumer's request refers or recommends to consumer in connection with this property. This just protects you in case you are the type of agent that will, hey, do you have an inspector I can use? And you've sent, you give your client 2 or 3 different inspectors for them to choose from, or if they need an insurance agent, you give them 2 or 3 different agents, or if they need an attorney, so, and my recommendation is always give them options. Don't just recommend to one person, because if that person fails, they're going to go back to you and say, oh, you told me this person. So make sure that you give them 2 or 3 recommendations and say you can interview all 3 of them, and then you decide who you want to work with. So it falls on them, not on you. All right, consumer's obligation. Consumer agrees to cooperate with broker in accomplishing the objectives of this agreement. Again, this is just the consumer's obligation, but let's go through the consumer's obligation because you need to know what they are too. So conducting all negotiations and efforts to locate suitable property only through broker, and referring to broker all inquiries of any kind from real estate licensees, property owners, or any other source. If consumer contacts or is contacted by an owner or real estate licensee who is working with an owner or views a property unaccompanied by a broker, consumer will at first opportunity advise the owner or real estate licensee that consumer is working with and represented exclusively by broker. Couldn't get that out. So make sure that you guys understand that, and the consumer understands that you are under a contract with them. And if they decide to go and sign another exclusive buyer contract, they can be in default. Okay, so just make sure that they understand their responsibility to you, the agent and the brokerage, so that everybody is clear. Okay. Now here, let's talk about signatures. Okay, here it says consumer and broker and sales associate. So obviously there's a signature for the broker and a signature for the sales associate. In this instance, you would sign here. And then when you send this to your broker, obviously they would sign their end as well. Okay. Making a diligent, good faith effort to perform the end contract terms of any purchase agreement or contract to lease or anything of that nature. So just read the consumer requisites from this contract. Okay. Basically what they need to do. Okay. Retainer, important. A non-refundable non-refundable. Retainer fee of XYZ for broker services provided for consumer is earned and payable upon execution of this agreement. This retainer is in addition to any compensation earned by broker and consumer agree the retainer is for the real estate services described herein and does not constitute a fee paid for a rental information list or described in section 475, 453 Florida statutes. Okay, so make sure that you read that statute. But here, what it's basically saying is that you can charge a retainer. So let's say you have sort of an iffy kind of buyer, right? Maybe you want to charge them a retainer, a non-refundable retainer, for you to go and show them houses, because, you know, we have those buyers that, you know, will sign the agreement, but then you show them 20 houses and then all of a sudden they change their mind. And now they don't want to buy. Or they find out that they couldn't buy what they thought their dream house was and now they want to postpone it. Okay. So you can charge a retainer at least to get covered while you're showing the houses. It's separate from the fee that you're going to charge for your closing or if they close on a property. Okay. So if they close on a property, you can just waive that fee. But if they decide not to close on a property, you can at least charge the retainer fee. Okay. Compensation. Broker compensation is earned when, during the term of this agreement or any renewal or extension, consumer or any person acting for or on behalf of the consumer contracts to acquire real property as specified in this agreement or defaults on any contract to acquire a property. This compensation is for broker services for consumer. Compensation received by broker, if any, from an owner or owner's broker for services rendered to consumer will reduce the amount owed by the consumer per this paragraph. Again, this is going back to we cannot charge more than what we are charging the consumer. So if we're working with a buyer and we tell them that we're going to charge them 3% and the selling side decides to cooperate and they pay 4%, you cannot get paid the 4%. You can only get paid what you put on this agreement. Okay, so if they're giving a bonus, you're not going to get the bonus if it's not in this agreement. Purchase or exchange. Here's where you're going to put, again, if it's a purchase or exchange, are you charging a flat fee to that buyer or a percentage? Are you going to charge a flat fee or percentage plus maybe a bonus or maybe a transaction fee? Because now this one has a plus. So in our case, if you have a transaction fee that you do happen to charge the client, then at that point you would want to use this side. You would want to use the percentage, let's say 2%, 3%, 4%, whatever you want to charge your buyer, plus maybe the transaction fee. Okay. If you know that the buyer wants only new construction and you're taking them to new construction because they're offering a $5,000 realtor bonus, then obviously you would put here, you know, find out what the developer's paying. The developer's paying 3% plus a $3,000 bonus. I would put in here 3% plus a $3,000 bonus. Because if you don't put that bonus and they pay the 3% and they're offering a bonus, but because you've only put 3% here, you're not going to get the bonus. You cannot charge that bonus. Lease, same thing. If you're dealing with rentals, again, you can put a flat amount or a percentage of the first month's rent. Or you can just charge a flat fee, or you can charge a flat fee or a percentage. So you can't charge, you can only do one or the other, first of all, okay? You can only do a flat fee or a percentage. You cannot do both. I can't put here $1,000 plus 3%, right? It has to be either a flat amount or a percentage, and then again, plus anything else that you want to charge them, like a transaction fee, a broker fee, anything of that nature, you would put it in here. All right, so gross lease value, that's pretty self-explanatory. Broker receipts will be credited toward the amount due broker for the purchase. Again, we're going to credit back what the other side is paying. So if the listing brokerage is paying or the seller decides to cooperate, then at that point, you would deduct whatever they pay from this fee. So if you were charging them 3% and you're getting 2% from the other side, then you would credit that 2% and now you're only charging the buyer the difference, which is 1%, okay? All right, so option broker, the same thing. If they're doing a lease with an option to buy, same exact thing, okay? Other broker will be compensated for all other types of acquisitions as if such acquisition were a purchase or exchange, okay? And then obviously it gives you, this is new, and also it gives you an additional terms section right here that you can put any additional terms that you might want to put on there. All right, protection period. Consumer will compensate broker if within how many days after the termination date consumer contracts to acquire any property which was called to consumer's attention by broker or any other person or founded by consumer during the term of this agreement. Consumer's obligation to pay broker fee ceases upon the consumer entering into a good faith exclusive buyer brokerage agreement with another broker after the termination date. After the termination date. Keyword. So what does this mean? We'll compensate broker if within, and here it says if less than 30. I would do at least 60 because how many times haven't we worked with buyers and all of a sudden they decide to terminate the contract, you know, they don't want to work with you anymore. And all of a sudden they go because the cousin called them and said, oh my God, you're not going to use me for your purchase, you know, even though they've been working with you for 3 months looking at 100 houses. And now the cousin shows up out of nowhere. Oh my God, did you not know I have a real estate license? And now the buyer decides, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Yes, I'll just go ahead and put the contract in with you, right? After you did all the work. So I would at least put 60 days. Because in 30 days, anything can happen. But 60 days, at least you're protected a little longer. You can put more. You can put 120 days, 90 days, whatever you want. And during this term of this agreement, consumer's obligation to pay broker fee stops upon consumer entering into a good faith exclusive buyer brokerage agreement with another agent or another broker after the termination date. So let's say this contract terminates today on what's today? 7/25, 7/30, whatever it is today. 7/30, right? And it terminates today. But we have a 60-day protection period, right? So it's basically saying that if they enter into another agreement with another brokerage after the termination date, how many days? 60 days after the termination date, not before, because if they do it before, they still owe you money. They still owe you your compensation. You can still go after that compensation. But if they do it after the termination date, 60 days, 30 days, 90 days, after the termination date, this ceases to exist. This contract ceases to exist, and you cannot go after them. Conditional termination. At consumer's request, broker may agree to conditionally terminate this agreement. If broker agrees to conditionally terminate this agreement, consumer must enter a written agreement to this effect and pay a cancellation fee of X amount of dollars. Now, should you have a cancellation fee? You might be required by your broker to have some sort of cancellation fee if they do this. So we'll be talking about that later on, or maybe the broker's just going to allow you to decide what that fee is. It's, you know, we haven't gotten there yet. So if I were you, my time is valuable. If they decide to cancel the contract and they don't want to work with me, I'm fine with that. I have no problem canceling, you know, but if I showed you 10 houses and all of a sudden you decided you don't want to work with me just because you can't find your dream home or, you know, because your expectations are too high, then basically, you know, if they want to cancel with me because they want to go with their cousin, you know, then at that point, I would want to get paid for my time. So I would put a cancellation fee in there and let them decide whether they want to pay that cancellation fee or not by canceling this agreement. Okay? You're not going to hold them hostage. So if they want to cancel, you can cancel, but it is a conditional termination. And I can charge you, okay, for canceling this agreement. Broker may void the conditional termination and consumer. Okay, so let's go back here. A cancellation of X. Broker may void the conditional termination and consumer will pay the fee stated in the compensation paragraph less the cancellation fee if from the early termination date to termination date plus protection period, if applicable, consumer contracts to acquire any property which, again, you were the procuring cause. Prior to the early termination date was found by the consumer or called to consumer's attention by broker or any other person. So while they're in this contract with you, whether they find the property, you find the property, somebody else presents them the property, because they're under contract with you, they still owe you compensation. Okay. So, but this is saying cancellation fee. If the broker decides, you know, they gave them a conditional, they said, okay, we're going to cancel the agreement, but broker may void the conditional termination. And consumer will pay the fee stated in the compensation paragraph less the cancellation fee if from the early termination date meaning the conditional termination date, the early termination date, plus the protection period, plus the 30, 60, 90 days you put in here, if applicable, consumer contracts to acquire any property which prior to the early termination date was found by consumer or called to consumer's attention. So this is protecting you guys. This is totally protecting us from, again, that situation where you went and showed them 20 houses. They call you, Teresa, I'm sorry, I really don't want to work with you. I want to just go ahead and stop looking. You know, I'm not going to buy a house right now. We go ahead and do this conditional termination. And then next week they're putting in an offer with their cousin on a house that you showed them while they were under contract with you. You can still have them pay you your compensation. Okay, so this is really to protect us. Dispute resolution. This agreement will be construed under Florida law. All controversies, claims, and other matters in question between the parties arising from or relating to this agreement or the breach thereof will be settled by first attempting mediation. So this is just, again, the same sort of dispute resolution that we have on the listing agreement, on our as is. It's just, again, you're going to try to go to mediation first. If you can't get it done through mediation or fix the problem or, resolve the issue in mediation, it's going to go to arbitration. And if it, you can't resolve it in arbitration, it might go to court, right? So this is just, again, where it's telling the consumer, this is what is going to happen, Mr. Consumer, if, you default on this contract and there is a dispute. We're going to go to mediation. If we can't come to an agreement, we're going to go to arbitration. If we can't come to arbitration agreement, we might have to take it to court. So again, consumer and broker or authorized associate. Now this, we have not decided as a brokerage at La Rosa yet. So as soon as we find out, we will let you know. We haven't decided whether the broker is going to be signing these agreements in its totality, or are they giving us authorization to sign this agreement? Okay, so we're going to have to wait on that decision. It will probably be posted in the new manual that's probably going to come out with all the new changes and all the broker regulations. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that right now I would just have the broker sign it, but in the future they might authorize us to sign this. Okay. But to me, it's like, let's just have the broker sign it, because at the end of the day, they're going to still have to sign here anyway. So why don't we just have them sign there? Same thing. All right. Assignment. Person found broker may assign this agreement to another broker. So if for some reason, let's say the buyer doesn't want to buy with you, now they're going to do something else, whatever. They you did a conditional termination, or they decided, that they're not going to work with you. They're going to go with maybe the listing broker, right? Maybe they just decided to go with the listing agent. You can assign this agreement to the listing agent and just maybe charge a referral fee to the listing agent. Okay, so right now, if they're not paying any compensation at all, you can do a referral to the listing agent and still get paid through a referral. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. I just want to stick to this today, but I just wanted to throw that out there. But for right now, just have the brokers sign it. Okay. Brokerage relationship. Broker will act as a transaction broker. We've always been a transaction broker, which means we can just, we can do both sides of the deal, right? We're available to be able to do both sides of the deal if we need to. Okay. We'll present our offers and counter offers in a timely manner. So that's just very self-explanatory, with buyer unless waived in writing, and obviously other terms. Acknowledgement modifications. Consumer has read this agreement and understands its contents. This agreement cannot be changed except by written agreement signed by both parties. Electronic signatures will be acceptable and binding. brokerage commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. We've always known this. It's never been a set fee for listings, and it's never been a set fee for buyers. It's totally all negotiable. Broker may not receive compensation from any source that exceeds the amount of rate agreed to with the consumer. Again, if we put 3% on this agreement and the listing site is paying 4%, you cannot charge the 4%. You can only charge the 3% that you agreed to charge the consumer. Okay. However, I love that word. Consumer agrees that broker may receive separate compensation from the owner of the property for services rendered to the owner by the broker, for which consumer will not be responsible. So this is for the instance where you're the listing agent, you find the buyer, you have an agreement with the buyer. Maybe you have an agreement with a buyer and you take them to see other properties. All of a sudden you got a listing. Now you're going to take them to go see your listing and they love that house. They want to buy that house. Basically, you can still, if you have an agreement with the buyer, you can still represent the buyer and charge them for their, whatever you're going to charge to represent the buyer. And you can still charge the seller for your compensation. So one has nothing to do with the other, which is a great thing, which means if I put on my listing agreement that I'm charging 4% or 5% or 6% to the seller, I can still collect that and still collect the 3% if I represent the buyer in that particular transaction. You cannot do that if the listing is not yours, but if the listing is yours, you can do that. So now basically it says broker may receive separate compensation from the owner because they're representing the owner and they already have an agreement with the owner that they're getting paid compensation. But now you have a buyer for that property and you've been representing that buyer. Then you already have an agreement with that buyer. You can still charge the buyer and the seller. Will you do that? Probably not, because you're trying to close a deal. But totally up to you. You can. Okay. So that's kind of nice because they're protecting us in that instance. And again, it's really just giving full disclosure here. Okay. You're going to have all the signatures, authorized associated broker. Again, all the signatures need to be signed, and we are done. If you have any questions, you can put your questions below in the comments. I do watch my comments on my YouTube channel. I will go ahead and reply to your comments. My information is also down below down the description of this video. You can always contact me if you still have any questions, any doubts. That's what we're here for. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with others, and I'll see you next time.